Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Madison Alley TV Fireside Chat. I am not Tony Weisman. I am your host, Ruben Hendel, and we'll be introducing Tony in a moment. We're looking forward to spending the next hour with you, having a chat with the great Tony Weisman.
Hey, good to see you, Ruben.
Yeah, good to see you, my friend. Welcome, welcome.
It's great to be with you.
Thanks. Yeah, we are also lucky to have the next hour or so to spend with Tony, our distinguished guest. We're going to hear from Tony about his career during our next hour and his views on many things. But just as a kind of quick intro to welcome Tony, he's currently the founder and CMO of SnapPoint. He, in addition, was the CMO of Dunkin' Donuts, one of his great roles of many that he's had in his career, and for about 10 years worked for Digitas, which we share as a background.
We do.
And
yes, we do.
Yeah, and so much more we're going to get to hear from Tony. Just by way of introducing myself, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ruben Hendel. I'm currently a managing director at Madison Alley Global Ventures, and I'm going to host this chat. And we wanted to kind of start the chat a little bit with a drink and a cocktail. I think Tony's going to start. Here are the cocktails, and I got a little virtual going, so here's my Manhattan. But Tony, why don't you tell us about what you're drinking and how you made it?
I'm holding an old fashioned, which is my preference of choice, made with rye. And we figured, hey, it's the end of the day. It's a good time to have a cocktail while we're having a fireside chat. And so I like mine on the rocks, and I'm using Whistle Pig, which I'm a big fan of. And I believe, Ruben, that you have some bitters that you're particularly proud of. Is that right?
I do. That is right. So here's mine. I'm calling this an Old Manhattan, which is literally a hybrid of an old fashioned and a Manhattan, where I use both bourbon, of course, and vermouth. Vermouth doesn't usually go in the old fashioned, as you know, but I use a little sweetener from the old fashioned and a dash of water from the old fashioned. So we'll call it an Old Manhattan. And a couple of very cool bitters, Green Bar, orange
Cool.
bitters,
Cool.
Bitter Cube, which is like a licorice kind of bitter. And of course, our old fave, Angostura. So a little mix
like
of all of those things.
It's a bitters cocktail in a cocktail.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say that.
Cheers.
So cheers, and cheers everybody. And we hope you guys like the idea of 5 o'clock in cocktails. Okay, shall we get going?
Sure, let's do it.
So just before we dive into talking with Tony, just a little bit about Madison Alley for those of you who aren't familiar. Madison Alley is the premier boutique investment bank working with marketing services and marketing technology firms, including analytic firms, performance marketing firms, commerce agencies, as I mentioned, marketing technology firms and others. That's really our sole focus and mission. And we have a bunch of folks like myself who used to run agencies and of course bankers, and that together really puts us and has us focus on the marketing industry exclusively. And so as you can see on the left side there, Madison Alley Global Ventures is kind of what we call the bank that helps folks both find companies to buy and if folks want to sell or get investments in their companies and do capital raises. But as a part of that community building, we have what we call Madison Alley TV, which is what you're taking part in now. And we've had some great talks in the past, and I know this will be the best one yet. And we'll even mention the one coming up at the end of our discussion today. And we also have what we like to call the Madison Alley Distinguished Network, which are a whole bunch of advisors that we bring together occasionally just to keep us very deep in the space and hear kind of from all different sides. So that's a little bit about Madison Alley. Now on to our discussion for today. We're going to kind of start by talking a little bit about Tony's career journey. Of course, getting to Dunkin', which is certainly one of his highlights. We'll move on to talking about some marketing trends that Tony is seeing, some of the different kinds of work Tony's doing, both board work and advisory roles, kind of wrap up, if you will, with some of Tony's leadership lessons that I think you all will definitely find enjoyable. And last but not least, we have some QA that of questions that many of you provided some questions, and we got to pick a few. And so we'll definitely finish up with some of those questions that you asked. So that's what we're going to do today. Tony, does that sound good?
It sounds good to me, Ruben. Thanks.
Okay. Well, let's look into the Tony world, which is impressive as can be. So Tony's going to jump in a second, but just so I know he's too bashful to kind of talk about what the stellar career that he's had, but began his career at Leo Burnett, which needs no introduction, then on to Chief Marketing Officer of Draft, which for those of you who don't know was really one of the first truly global, what used to be called integrated marketing services agencies. Then made the move over to Digitas. We actually overlapped for a couple of years, but I was not in Chicago. And so Tony started by running the Chicago office, but then as you can see, quickly basically took over the joint. And after about 10 years or so was selected by what I would imagine to be the leading marketers or perceived marketers in the United States and probably abroad, became the Chief Marketing Officer of Dunkin US and Dunkin Brands, otherwise as we used to call it Dunkin Donuts, now known as Dunkin. So had a great client side experience and now is doing many things, right? Both being on the board of several companies, which I'll let him talk about in a second. And then also an operating partner role at a couple of private equity and financial firms. So Tony's super busy. And again, we thank you for carving some time out to talk with us today. But maybe if you could start off by just really bringing us through a little bit what you're doing now on both sides of that fence, if we could start there.
Well, right now, what I'm doing is I have the pleasure of working with a whole host of investment firms and companies and helping, guide strategy, go-to-market planning, growth strategies, et cetera, in the areas that I'm most familiar with, digital transformation and, various omnichannel marketing. So it's really exciting. I work with companies at all stages, very early stage, larger companies, enterprise sized businesses, both private and public. And I get a chance to, meet all kinds of people. It's a nice, diverse range of experiences, some advising, some consulting, some board work. And I'm learning a lot. It's an exciting time to be doing this. As you know, at Madison Alley, there's a lot of activity in the market, and certainly the entire context of everything that we live in. You were early days at Digitas, my friend, and you and David and team had a vision for what was going to become a digitally driven world. And I can't imagine anybody back then anticipated it would be quite so digital, quite so fast, or, as many others have said, we had 10 years of advancement in 10 weeks. And so it's an exciting time to be in the midst of that.
I think maybe our audience doesn't know like these companies specifically. Would you mind just doing like a one-liner for each one? I mean, I know there's a lot, but like I think it'd be super interesting just for people to see kind of the range of things that you're specifically doing.
Sure. So Cardlytics is an Atlanta-based ad tech firm, which allows consumers to enjoy discounts on some of their favorite places to shop automatically through rewards inside their online checking on every major bank. I had the pleasure of joining them as the first independent director when they were private for several years, and then we had an IPO on NASDAQ several years ago. So that's an exciting space. We've done some recent acquisitions. 3Q Digital is an agency that will remind a lot of our days at Digitas, that they're world-class in performance marketing. And so they help companies, largely those with a direct consumer motion, to optimize their spend on digital platforms. In Moment is a customer experience company, a leading company that understands the blend of technology and human to help companies understand what's going on with the customer experience and how can we improve it. And those are the kind of things from my Dunkin days that, unfortunately, when you're in a corporate environment, sometimes that's a little opaque, or sometimes you get those insights way late or way after the fact, where you can do something and in moments really figure out how to get those insights to people who can make a difference in the customer experience quickly. Klaviyo is a Boston-based SaaS business that is in the business of helping small businesses and entrepreneurs, and to some extent enterprise companies, develop one-to-one relationships with their customers. So they can own that marketing directly through platforms like email and SMS and not have to go through intermediaries. And has been a really exciting growth story, located just blocks from the Digitas office in downtown Boston. And Play to Pay is a very early stage business that's inventing a whole new experience in mobile devices. So allowing consumers to play games to lower their phone bills. So cool. You see a wide range, some B2B, some B2C, and at different stages.
Great. And on the financial side?
Principally, I work with Madison Dearborn Partners, which is a private equity firm based in Chicago. I had the great pleasure of knowing some of the earliest members of that team when I was starting my career. And they have a variety of verticals that I work across. And I have the opportunity so InMoment is a Madison Dearborn company. So I sit on the board of a portfolio company. I do some consulting with some of their businesses in different parts of the company. And really, really smart people who have incredible experience and have taught me a lot. And I've enjoyed partnering with them. I work with so 3Q Digital is a business that's owned by PSP Partners and Erie Street, and I have the pleasure to work with both of them on that investment. Erie Street is led by Terry and Jerry Gronke, who are longtime Chicago fixtures in the marketing services world, and PSP is the family office business for Penny Pritzker, and they are terrifically smart investors. And then a bunch of others on more of an ad hoc basis.
Great. And to the audience, raise your hand if you had 11 companies on your Tony Weisman bingo card. I think I win.
All right.
I think I win.
So you just turned this into a new business pitch. There is a bingo card. And when do I find out what the magic word is? What the magic phrase?
We're all gonna get back to you. Apparently, there are like close to 200 people listening to this and watching this. So they all got Tony Weisman bingo cards. I don't know if they had 11 on it or not.
At the bottom of this cocktail, if you persuade me, I will tell you my favorite, the phrase that pays in a new business pitch story.
I'm going to hold you to that, or you're going to remind me at the end. But thanks, and that's an incredible journey, but not just a journey. I think it seems like you're doing more than ever right now. So thanks for that, and I know everybody appreciates that.
Sure.
Let's sort of start maybe a little bit at the beginning. I mean, you began your career at Leo Burnett. I'm going to say that fully just to make sure that everybody in the audience knows what I'm talking about. And can you just talk about like what attracted you to the advertising industry to begin with?
Sure. Well, the good news, I mean, I started out with my father was a madman. He was in the industry. He was a very close partner to Fairfax Cohn, one of the founders of Foot, Cone and Belding. And so I sort of grew up watching him in the business and watching these iconic characters that they created, like Smokey Bear and the famous Raid Cam. And I was fascinated by it. And he seemed like he has such a really interesting life. So early on, I had a fascination with the industry. And then I was incredibly fortunate to be recruited into the client service development program at Leo Burnett right out of school, which really was an MBA in advertising. And one of the greatest things in my life was to be a part of that powerful, tangible culture, to get the benefit of the time and effort they put into training us, the rotations through various businesses. I started my career at Leo Burnett in a conference room sitting next to Rashad Tobacco-Walla, your next speaker, and
spoiler alert, everybody.
Yes, yeah. And I owe a great deal of my career to Rashad, who was a visionary then as he is to this day. And he was the one who pointed out to me early on, there's more to this than just advertising. Pay attention to the other parts of the business. So he was he was a very early inspiration for me. I also had the great fortune to meet my wife at Leo Burnett. And so I had a terrific time there. I spent about half my time on the McDonald's business, which was just an incredible joy. Much of the memorabilia behind me, including a basketball signed by Michael Jordan and Larry Bird from the Nothing But Net commercials, was from that terrific experience. So I feel very grateful. But it became apparent to me that, particularly from the McDonald's experience, that the entire 360 of the marketing paradigm was important to know. We used to sweat over whether or not the ads were right or the media plan was right, when in fact, you had to have exactly the right number of Happy Meal toys so you didn't run out a day early or have too many a day late. And that stuff started to fascinate me, and really came to understand the store experience and the way McDonald's thought about it in a very holistic way. And that's what led me to go to Draft, which really was a world-class organization in CRM and database and digital and analytics, and really understand aspects of the business that I wasn't learning in an advertising environment. And we had a great run. It was incredibly exciting time. And not long after that, David and Laura at Digitas called with the opportunity to run the Chicago office of Digitas. And I'm sorry, you and I didn't have a chance to work more closely together, but we certainly, overlapped with a whole bunch of folks. But and Digitas had a culture as palpable and impressive as that I had at Leo Burnett, but was also, most people don't even know that Digitas was a word that was made up that was combining digital and gravitas. So the idea was, let's make digital really for the big brands and bring the sort of discipline to it that they needed. And I had a great time there. We grew the Chicago office, then they asked me to look after Boston, and ultimately all the US. And so that was I always felt very fortunate that I got to learn all aspects of marketing through that.
And how does someone who started, as in a relatively entry level career at Leo Burnett, how does somebody, or how did you go to end up running all of Digitas North America? What are the kinds of things that, for those folks who might be listening, like, what do you attribute it to?
Well, I think several things. First of all, I think that I became pretty focused relatively early in my career in new business and growth. And so I was able to learn how to get pretty good at new business, how to suss out what the hidden agenda was, how to put teams together. And by winning more new business, it gave me the opportunity to expand my footprint inside the company. I think the other thing that I learned was that this is a we business, not a me business. And you really, people talk all the time about surround yourself with people who are better than you. You really have to do it. And I was incredibly humbled by the smart, ambitious, talented people that I was fortunate enough to be around, and to realize that, to move into a general management role, you really needed outstanding partners. And so I've spent a lot of time in my career recruiting, whether they be entry level or senior people, because, Leo himself said we're in a business where the inventory goes up and down the elevator every day. And so I put a real priority on that. And then I think the toughest lesson that most people have to learn as they expand their responsibilities is the transition from doing the work to inspiring others to do the work. And what got you here isn't going to get you there, because you can't do it all. And in fact, what you want to be able to do is inspire people to the outcomes you want and let them get there the way that they feel most comfortable doing it. And so I had some great mentors who taught me that. I think of them all the time, and they were an inspiration to me. And I know how great it felt when they gave me the opportunity to flourish and to step up. And so I've always sort of thought the thing I'm proudest of in my entire career is the terrific people I've been able to be surrounded by, and the amazing things they've gone on and done.
That's great. That's great. I think that's well said, super valuable. Thank you for sharing that. So let's kind of start to move towards the Dunkin move. But
Sure.
But before we do that, I want to get maybe a little bit sensational, right? Because because I've been in a bit of your shoes, and there's always a little drama and a little interest relative to leaving a very senior position and going to another senior position. In your case, in some ways more so, and in some ways less so, because you weren't going to a competitor of Digitas. You were going to, not a competitor, right? To a big Fortune X company that's a big brand business with a completely different job. But I'd love to hear, because I actually haven't heard this story from you, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear, like, how does that happen? Like, you're running Digitas North America, and then X amount of months later, you're the CMO of Dunkin. Like, how does that happen?
Well, so let's start with the fact that Digitas won a competitive process to set up the mobile ordering and loyalty program for Dunkin. So they were a client, and we were doing amazing work with them. They were just incredibly inspiring. They had a lot of courage. They pushed us, and this was a new frontier. And the business was being led by Nigel Travis at Dunkin' at the time, who was absolutely believed that in the QSR fast food world, that the first brands that got digital right were going to win, meaning, apps, loyalty, mobile ordering, et cetera. And he was right. And so I got to know them through that. And a new president, Dave Hoffman, came in, who had been a senior executive at McDonald's. And as a good agency guy, I went to meet him, and we cultivated a relationship. And it was through that I discovered that he was going to look for a chief marketing officer. And I loved Dunkin', the brand. I loved QSR. All my years at McDonald's, I just fell in love with retail. I fell in love with the fact that you could start a campaign on Thursday, and on Sunday, you either knew it won or it didn't win. And so there's just something incredibly dynamic about it. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and I said I'd love to do it. And we got to talking, and that's how that came about. So I was very lucky that I had that in with that leadership team, and that's how I got the job.
So a sensational move, but not sensational in the gossipy going.
No, not in the gossipy way.
No. Geez. Well, everybody, I tried. I tried to get some good dirt out of this. So how did you make that transition, right? So you land in your seat, and what's the first 90 days like for you?
Well, they ran a great process. I got to meet the board and the senior leadership. Obviously, they had been running a search, and they had access to all kinds of candidates. So it was a competitive search, but through that, I got to forge relationships with the board and senior leadership. I felt very welcomed by the leadership, in particular Scott Murphy, who was my partner in running the operations of the business. He was just incredibly welcoming, and that's a very, very important part of the Dunkin' culture. It is a very warm and welcoming group, and so I spent a lot of time, with these various leadership team members, some of whom had been there for decades and really understood the business. And it's a complex business. You got 10,000 stores, you have a complicated supply chain, you have, one element of the supply chain making fresh, donuts and baked goods every day, another element delivering frozen goods, paper goods to the store, et cetera. And so they were very, very good about sort of walking me through, taking me to see donuts being made. And I spent a lot of time in the stores too. I mean, there is absolutely no replacement for time spent in that store. And I worked the drive-through. The people who were incredibly patient were the crew, who let me, take 3 times longer to, make a drink than they ought to make, that it should take. But they were very sweet and very good, very patient with me. But when you spend that time in that store and understand what the consumer wants at that moment, how the operations are set up. Marketing in an environment like that does not happen in a vacuum. You have to be able to work within the confines of the physical space, within the menu. And, one of the things that QSRs in particular and Dunkin' notably are known for is speed. And you can't do anything to slow it down. And we all know this, right? We all go to Dunkin' in the morning for our coffee. We are invariably late. It might be raining. Traffic is a little heavier. You really, really have a premium on speed. And so when you're developing menu items or you're thinking about marketing, you really have to think from that store experience back. So that's how I was welcomed in and learned the business. And I thank all those folks who took the time to teach me.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Love that. And so I know people, when they saw that you were going to speak and saw your close ties to Dunkin', and when you were there, then there's the famous rebranding exercise. So you gotta tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, yeah. So I'm the guy who I guess had a hand in dropping donuts, although I do not expect in my lifetime that people will just refer to it only as Dunkin'. It'll still be Dunkin' Donuts for a long time, and that's fine. So the founder, and the founder was who founded the business, and his son ran the business after him. We had the chance to talk to his son. 2 decades ago they thought about this, so it wasn't necessarily a new idea, but it seemed like the right moment. And so I just jumped on and I said, we got to do this, and we got to do it now. And there's just a ton of good reasons to do it. So I think there's some very rational reasons to do it. Everybody already calls the brand Dunkin' already, right? It's like it's America runs on Dunkin'. If you live in New England, directions are often given as go to the Dunkin', turn left, go to the next Dunkin', and turn right. You're going to go out grab a bunch of coffees for everyone in your office. You're doing a Dunkin' run, et cetera. So it's already in the culture, right? It's already colloquial. And then there's the business reasons, which is, yes, indeed, the business was founded by making a donut that had a handle. This was the original Dunkin' donut. Actually had a handle on the donut, and you would dunk it in your coffee. And that was the first store in Quincy, Mass.
Who had founding of Dunkin' Donuts and a handle on the donut on their Tony Weisman?
You did not have handle. You did not have handle.
No, I did not. I did not. Hopefully somebody did. Hopefully somebody did. Very cool.
Let's see. He's scrolling now. What else is on the bingo card?
Yeah.
So and we sell a lot of coffee, right? I mean, coffee is a growth industry. You don't have to be a savant. You go into any corner in the United States or in the world, and there's coffee everywhere. 67% of Americans drink coffee every day. And I used to say, the only things I can think of that more people use on a daily basis, or I hope do, are toothpaste and toilet paper. Now, if you could think of one, Ruben, I'd love to know it. But 2/3 of Americans on a daily basis is a big market. And so we really wanted to, spend more time focusing on the beverages because it's more where the market was going. So you take all those reasons together, right? Makes a lot of sense on paper. But this is an emotional decision, right? This is not an easy thing to, quote, give up something that has been a part of your life for so long, whether you're a franchisee or a corporate employee or a member of the crew or a part of the supply chain or whatever, or just a loyal customer. Like it's hard. So my take on this was to spend less time worrying about what we were giving up and focus more on what we were going to get. And that really was the key to how we went about it, which was, well, let's imagine a world where we're only Dunkin'. What do the stores look like? And you've now, of course, seen all these, refurbished stores that feature big bright signs with Dunkin'. They're easier to see at a distance, and it's cleaner and brighter. And so the store experience is a little fresher. And the thing to me, and we've talked about this a bit in the past, was the single most important icon at Dunkin' is the coffee cup. We sell 1 billion of those cups of coffee in the course of a year. But beyond Dunkin', the white coffee cup is ubiquitous in the world. So if you go back and you look at TV and film from the 70s and 80s, you will see cigarettes, beer, whiskey, et cetera, in scenes everywhere. Today, every filmed entertainment, whether it's TV or movie or video or whatever, people are walking around with white paper cups, right? Plus you see them everywhere in the world. And to me, that was going to be the canvas on which we were going to imprint this new brand and bring it to life. And so I had the great good fortune to partner with a terrific strategy and design shop, Jones, Knowles, Ritchie, JKR. And I said to them, I'd like you to lead our redesign and refresh the brand and focus on the cup. And when they first came in their first presentation, they put 200 cups on the table in front of the leadership team, paving the way for here's what this canvas can ultimately become for this brand. And that turned the conversation from what we were giving to, holy cow, how soon can we get to that? And they also had a brilliant insight, which was, and they were the ones who discovered that the font that you're so familiar with is called Frankfurter. If you had Frankfurter font on your bingo card, I will be stunned. It was created in 1973 at the height of a design revolution in the world, and it's ours. And so just moving the second word out and giving Dunkin or DNKN more space, let us have more freedom with the font. And that, we have these two great colors, pink and orange. We've got this fabulous font, and we just went crazy with it. And really, the folks at JKR laid that vision out, and it was able to take that to the franchisees and our partners, and everybody got super excited and started thinking less about what we were giving up, more about how soon can we get to that.
Very cool. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Not a lot of times you get to hear the kind of insight on that. So you deserve that drink, everybody. It's 5:33. So everybody in the East Coast anyway, 2:33 on the West Coast. If you're all already drinking, everybody grab a drink. Just one more specific thing on Dunkin', then I want to move on a little bit. But I do happen to know that Dunkin', as a QSR company and culturally, is probably at one end of the spectrum relative to the franchisees driving a lot of culture and decisions at Dunkin'. I mean, it's all about the franchisees, and I even have come to understand, again, franchisees in many of these situations have a ton of power, but like Dunkin', from what I understand, have been told by others that have worked at Dunkin' and done work for them, it's really at a serious level. So that implies that to make a change, right, a change like that would require a lot of leadership. I guess we'd all probably be curious to know kind of how, you were obviously a part of that leadership, helping drive that. I mean, how would you say, because you can't just ram it down anybody's throat, right? So what are the leadership lessons you get out of that?
Dunkin' is, in fact, 100% franchised.
Right.
And, I went into this saying, I think that's one of our competitive advantages. I think the truth is that these franchisees know their customers and know their community better than we ever will. And I have a bias toward companies that have franchisees who are in those markets, as opposed to corporate employees who may or may not have the same vested long-term interest. The franchisees, for the most part, in my experience, want to build this business over the long term, give it to their kids. So they're incredibly vested in the community, and they're very connected, and they're in the stores every day. And so, I really enjoyed, dinners and breakfast and time and visiting. And, as soon as I got there, like, hey, come visit. Every time I got an invitation to go visit, I'd go visit. And I really, really enjoyed that time, because that's how you really learn the business. Now, I will tell you that you can't just snap. There's a great story. Harry Truman's leaving the White House. Ike is coming in. He's, the general who won the Second World War and led the supreme NATO commander. And Harry says, poor Ike, he's going to sit here and do this and say, do that, and nothing's going to get done. And the truth is, like any environment, whether it's a corporate environment or franchisee environment, apart from things like the military, you have to bring people along. And, I would say that particularly with franchisees, it may not be as straight a path, and it may take more time to have the conversations, lay out the case, build the followership. But once they're aligned, it's going to get executed really well, because they're with you. Okay. They didn't just get a memo from headquarters. They have bought in, and it's going to get done really, really well. And so I just sort of think about that. That's core to the process, is you have to realize that it's not a straight line. You can't snap your fingers and say, hey, do this. And by the way, these are savvy business people. And when they think what you're suggesting isn't going to work, they're right more often than not. So, and things like changing the brand, or a lot of other things we did. We updated the menu, we introduced espresso, and we got rid of the foam cups. I mean, probably the most contentious thing we did was drop foam cups. This is not only were foam cups cheaper and better at insulation and more reliable, but the brand was sort of based on that foam cup. And we were like, no, it for the next generation of our consumers, it just won't work. It's irresponsible, and it's bad for the environment, and it will be bad for business. And initially, of course, they were very hesitant because that was such an incredibly central part of the business. But soon enough, they're like, this is making my customers happier. It works just as well. And now I'm all in. So I would say that if you haven't ever worked in a franchise environment, you should. And I'll tell you, the most important thing is when you are recommending to a corporate culture, hey, let's take our money and spend it this way, that's one dynamic. When you're recommending to an independent business person, I want you to spend your money this way, it's a higher hurdle. It takes more work. You got to have a better story. You have to have more empathy, more understanding, a better case. You're going to get pressed, but you know what? You're going to be better.
Love that. Love that. I think that's great. I think there's a lot to learn in all of that. So thank you for that. So now let's sort of switch gears and get you out of that story time and get you a little bit into the kind of work you're doing today. And I guess just kind of starting at the top with, let's say, the companies you're on the boards of, obviously kind of anonymously, can you give us a sense for how these different board roles, how they differ? Sort of what are the elements of some versus the elements of other in sort of how you see these boards working? Because probably a lot of folks that are listening are either in agencies that are independent agencies, might be running independent agencies or agencies owned by private equity, or what have you. And obviously one of those boards is public, but like, can you give us a sense for how those dynamics differ and how you see these boards operating?
I mean, I really enjoy the boards I have the pleasure of serving on. And they're all at different stages. I mean, you got public, private, you got later stage, early stage, you got B2B, SaaS, B2C, et cetera. But I would say that one of the things that I think makes me an effective board member is that I grew up an agency guy, just like you, Ruben, right? And I grew up in a world where my job was to give clients ideas for their business, or you take my ideas, make them your own. And so, I tell board members and CEOs when I meet them, like, I don't need any credit. Like, you take the idea. If you want to tell me that it works, great. If it doesn't work, great. We just have a conversation. And by the way, you never have to tell anybody we had this conversation. I spent a career having other people take my ideas and claim as their own. That's fine as long as it helps the business. So I think that the commonality across them all is you're not the CEO. You don't get to tell anybody what to do. You're in an advising role. And if you don't want to be an advisor, then you shouldn't do this. And I happen to like that. I happen to like earning the trust of the leadership, sharing with them, sometimes in a board meeting, more often than not. I mean, what's the other thing we learned as agency people? Nothing interesting ever happens under lights in a conference room, right? You have a private conversation, you have a cup of coffee, you have a drink or dinner or whatever, and you can be more vulnerable and more open. That's how I like to work. I like to have private conversations with leaders of companies where we can talk openly about what they might be struggling with, how I might be able to help, or sometimes I just say, like, I'm a good pillow to scream into. I think what's common across them is that I am independent. I am not an investor, and so my goal is to keep the company and the CEO's vision as my primary task. It's a little different from investors who sometimes have slightly different views. And the brilliance of independence is that you have that counterpoint. And because I am not beholden to the investors, I have no problem disagreeing. I like a disagreement, or when we have healthy debate. And I think that the CEOs that I've worked with, who I think are truly world-class are the ones who inspire the conversation. They want the debate and they want to have that, give and take so that we get to a better outcome. That's how I view the roles. The reason I have this variety is because it's just incredible. For very early stage businesses, you're talking about incredibly different issues, right? And you're talking about, should we pivot? Have we got the right thesis? Is the better business right here instead of here, right? I mean, it's a very wet clay environment where you're trying to create a business that you believe is really going to succeed. And, it's the most overused word, but there's a lot of pivots. On the other hand, in more mature businesses, you're very cognizant of guidance and achieving earnings and, what are the public markets saying? What are the competitors doing? And, how do we make sure that the business is performing along the lines of, the kind of guidance that we put in the market, because, that's how public companies run. So I like that mixture.
And do you find your role, do you tend to work more? It sounds like you do a lot of work, obviously, and that to be expected directly with the CEO and the other parts of the senior management team. How much of the work do you do with your fellow board members, and how does that, do they all work into the organization, or do you also work together?
It's a really good question. Both. Some of them, based on, on their own interests or areas of expertise, will lean more directly into the organization. But I'm a big believer in professional boards. Like, we're not there to do the work. We have one major decision, which is, do we believe in the vision and the leader? And if so, then we're there to back them up. I think for the most part, the board members that I have the privilege of serving with get that and understand that role. On one of the boards that I serve on, the night before every board meeting, we have a bar we go to and we hang out. Just us, no executives, just us. And it's a really good, two things. One, we get to have, a cocktail, but we bond as a group because, you're all coming from different places. And two, you go into the board meeting the next day with, okay, there's only a couple things that we really think are worth really diving into. Because businesses are so complex, you could take 6 or 7 hours and never get to the things that you think matter. But this way, we sort of, okay, tomorrow, let's really take the time to drill into X and Y, and we can skip past the other stuff. And as a result, we've become very good friends. These have become friends of mine, and we hang out and have dinners and the like. And I really enjoy that. They're really smart people I would not have met any other way. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And obviously most of these companies are, marketing service companies in one way or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that puts you, and you have sort of one public company in the midst, one more mature. You talked about, you have some that are earlier stage and some in the middle, but you're working with now several companies that are, kind of right in the zone. And as we both know, and probably most of the audience knows, when you've got agencies, companies, sub $100 million revenue agencies and companies, these are companies that have ideas, typically, specific ways, new ways to do something differently, put things together differently, use media differently, ideas, or just put all the marketing competencies together, whatever that is. They have a point of view, right? And that's why they're growing, and that's why they're taking share, and ultimately that's why they gain value. They're, said another way, they're not just doing what everybody else is doing and trying to do more of it. So with that, you've got great access to, what's going on out there today. So, fortunately, the marketing industry has gotten to the point where it seems to be, there are articles about it in the Wall Street Journal every day. But what are you seeing as some of the sort of trends that are interesting you in terms of what any of these companies actually might be putting into the marketplace, or how they're putting things into the marketplace for their clients?
Sure. I mean, I'm fascinated. I mean, the level of innovation, the speed with which things are being created and rolled out is just unprecedented. And I am just absolutely in awe of these entrepreneurs who have a vision and courage and are just really inspiring. And I have the great pleasure of working beyond the board in consulting and advising with a bunch of them. Some of them are marketing services, as you mentioned, companies like Pixability and Holler and Nudge and Perksy and Philo and Affinity Answers. These are incredibly interesting businesses that didn't exist a few years ago and are really changing the way marketers think about connecting with consumers. And some of them are direct to consumer, like Hydro, which is, fabulous connected fitness rowing, which Ruben, you should have. If you don't, I recommend.
I'm taking that as a bit of an insult, but we'll.
No, it's not an insult. It's just no, it's not. It's like it's time to step up, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Okay.
You've worn out the old equipment and you've moved.
Plug for Hydro. Gotcha.
That's right. And some of the trends that I'm seeing across all of these are, first of all, you and I grew up in a world where you sort of divided the world between whether it was a CPG and it was, distributed through, grocery or mass, and it was disintermediated, or it was direct to consumer. Everyone's direct to consumer. Every business has a DTC component to it now, which is exciting. And so, the businesses that didn't used to understand that now have figured out that they need to understand that. And the amount of data and learning you can get from having a one-to-one consumer relationship is unparalleled. The other thing, real time is like the only time. Real time used to be like, well, we could maybe get to real time is time. Like, forget it. Anything short of real time, forget it. I think, I grew up in the world where John Wanamaker made this quote at the end of the 19th century: 50% of my advertising is wasted. I just wish I knew which 50%. Not so much. Not so much. And a lot of that applied to TV advertising is that, well, guess what? With CTV and every other form of Wanamaker had a good run for a century. It's over. We also grew up with all these distinctions above and below the line, brand versus performance. Performance marketing is marketing. If you're not driving outcomes, if you're not driving results, it's not worth doing. And it's not going to get funded. So I think that's a big change. And I think this above the line distinction that I grew up in the industry is gone. We all buy and use and love brands that don't do traditional brand advertising, but that we discovered on an Instagram feed or what have you. And all of a sudden we're passionate about this brand that we discovered at what used to be known as the bottom of the funnel in purchase. I think that's very exciting. I think the funnel idea is way outdated, but I think it really sort of reinvents the relationship between actually making a purchase and when I fall in love with a brand. Everybody talks about the tech stack. The tech stack is crazy expensive. It's eating into budgets. Media budgets are being, trimmed as a result. This is every marketer's nightmare. Like, how much tech is enough tech without spending too much? I don't know if you had tech stack and the bingo card, but
I did. Yeah.
You did. Of course you did.
John Hickey did as well. Shout out John Hickey.
All right. Yeah. How about ad tech, martech? We're not going to go there. But I think the reality is, like, all of a sudden, we used to talk a lot about how the CMO needs to get to know the CTO. They are like this now, right, with the CFO, because the expenditures required to build the stack are huge. And at some point, you have to say, that's a nice piece of data. It's not essential, right? It's a far, far more rigorous level of assessment as to what data do I really need, as opposed to be, quote, nice to have that. In the last few days, months, the trend of all trends is the metaverse, which somebody ought to have on a bingo card. I read in Axios today that the metaverse has been mentioned 991 times so far this year in investor presentations. Disney mentioned it in their earnings call a couple of days ago. Who really knows what the metaverse is going to be about? But now it's all of a sudden it's on the agenda for every company to think about, to the extent to which they want to be a part of it. All that is a backdrop, right? Like, all this technology, all these moving pieces. At the same time, Ruben, stories still matter. People relate to stories. Human, empathetic stories. Instagram even took the word. They're called stories. And that's one of the things I love about audio. They're immersive. Like, it's just a wonderfully exciting place to get lost. And I never want to lose sight of the fact that technology, the stack, et cetera, can do a lot of good things, but you still need a story that people care about.
That is a perfect way to wrap the interview part of this, or the discussion part of this. Thank you. And I personally really appreciate it. So thank you for that. And we only got through about half the questions that I wanted to ask you, but maybe we'll have a sequel if we get some positive feedback on this, or we'll take it on the road or something. But before we break, we do have a couple of questions from the audience, which I'd love to ask you if that's okay. Yeah. Sure. These were submitted before, and the first one I'm going to pick is from an old colleague and friend, Rich Magalik, who's at Mags and Morelli now. Sorry, Rich. And his question is, have the events of the last 2 years altered the environment for talent? What new skills do companies need? I assume the events means our lovely pandemic. Yeah.
Great question. The number one skill that companies need, and that people inside these companies need, is agility. Whatever you're walking into will not be the same in a year or 2 or 3. And I don't know where it's going. Nobody does. But agility is the key. And I think if I were interviewing for a role today, one of the questions I would ask is, give me an example of when you had to do something radically. You had to make a quick change. And how do you feel about that? I think companies will thrive when they are filled with people who embrace the need to make quick change as opposed to fight it. And, you and I have grown up around companies that pivoted, the most overused word in our industry.
Sure.
It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a heck of a lot easier when you have a whole bunch of people who embrace pivoting.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Robert Longert at Day One Agency asks, how did your time leading on the agency side at Digitas impact your approach as leader on the brand side at Dunkin? So I guess translating agency leadership skills to sort of corporate Dunkin skills.
Well, first of all, I would say that I'm really glad I got to sit on both sides of the desk, and anybody who's in this industry on one side or the other, I highly recommend sitting on both sides. It's really eye-opening. And you really understand how, if you're on the agency side, how what you do fits into the overall life of the people you're working with. For me, I think it was a few things. First of all, we went about bringing on some new partners. And we're very lucky. We were surrounded by outstanding agency partners who had great capability and loved working together and loved pushing us. And so I think that was a goal of mine, was to bring partners around who would have those characteristics. I think I helped the Dunkin team be better clients by virtue of my agency side. We always say agencies can take yes or no. They can't take I don't know. And they can't take I'll know it when I see it. I'll tell you a great story. America runs on Dunkin was the brief. When the agency was confronted with a new management, they decided to bring the new management new work. This is a long time ago in Dunkin. And the brief was America runs on Dunkin. And the creative team ultimately said, that's the line. And I have always kept that in mind, as our job on the client side is to write briefs that inspire. And when you hand over a brief that is essentially a laundry list of everything my boss expects me to get done from this, you haven't inspired. And on the other hand, when you hand over essentially the first ad to inspire a team, I think it puts the onus on you to be more choiceful as a client. And so I think that came from, being on the receiving end of both good and bad briefs. And then I think the other thing is, you owe your partners immediate, candid, and direct feedback. You do not have to say yes, but you cannot say not sure.
When I put you on, maybe you will answer this. Which, in retrospect, which side did you prefer?
Oh yeah, wow. I can't. There was so much about both I loved. I'll tell you what. The thing about being on the agency that I loved, well, I'll tell you a story. The very first brand that I had the chance to work on was Diet 7 Up, St. Louis-based company owned by Philip Morris. I developed a close friendship with the brand manager. He told me, and I'm a young pup in the business, the hour we get to spend with you every week is the highlight of my week. And I just was filled with, oh, that's so exciting. And like, we're the creative energy and we're the cool kids and we get to, right. And I love all my years in the agency environment of camaraderie and being around ideas and just the sense of energy and the joy of selling, of winning a piece of business or selling an idea or seeing it work. On the other hand, being on the client side, you understand the fullness of the business and it's just such a broader lens to understand what really does drive the business. And so I think the cumulative effect of those, I feel very blessed to have had.
Well answered. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Listen, I want to thank you so much for taking this time. Big round of applause. And you don't know this, but I get to hear the audience on Zoom, and it's a roaring round of applause.
Okay.
So,
wow.
So it's loud in my ear anyway.
Oh, God. Wow,
maybe not so loud where you are. So thank you very much. Just before we go, wanted to take the opportunity to let everybody know what's next, right? So somebody near and dear to Tony's heart, and somebody certainly near and dear to me professionally, Rashad Tabakawala. We're going to get to talk to him in about a month, and Michael Seidler, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Madison Alley, is going to do that one. But I know, Tony, you've got a good plug for that.
No, I tell you, here's the bingo for Rashad is 3 things. How many times he says there are 3 things?
Yeah, well, you're good at this.
No, he is 3 things. Okay, I will wrap with the phrase that pays was, and this was for the L'Oreal pitch, objects in mirror are closer than they appear. And the winner, Cha Chen, stood up and opened his presentation section with, as my flight instructor is fond of saying, objects in mirror are closer than they appear. I literally fell off my chair.
Wow.
So try that one in your next meeting.
Exactly. Cool. Good. Well, maybe Rashad's on now. I actually didn't check, but for those of you who haven't had a chance to hear Rashad, although many of you probably have, but if you haven't, and if you had, stay tuned and join us again on December 15th. Again, my sincere gratitude and thanks to Tony on behalf of all of us at Madison Alley and everybody in the audience. Thanks for having a drink with us, and great talking to you, Tony, and we'll see you around soon, okay?
Thank you, Ruben. It was a joy.
Okay. You bet, man. Take care. Okay, bye. Take care, everybody.